Okay,
everybody, welcome. Sorry. Welcome as we begin our council meeting of the 20th of August. Again, normally as we do, God of our fathers in whom we trust and whose guidance and grace this nation was born.
E tua atua aroura, nā tua mātu pono, nā tua aroha, e whānau mai, e Aotearoa.
Bless these council of a hut and give all things needed for their faithful discharge of their responsibilities.
Whakapainga mai mātou, ko nā mai whakatiki. Ho mai ki mātou nā mere pai ki are taki a mātou mahi. Nā mahi a huri aki e tia kapuri.
Give to each good health and good judgment for the decisions to be made, wisdom beyond our own, and a clear understanding so that we may promote thy glory and welfare of all in the city.
Ho mai te tēnei mātou, te ronga pai, me te wha o wha pai koki, kia whakataiki e te keranga e mātua atu te horeti, me te aratanga. Kia te korea me te ranga o te korea toto e whakatiki.
Jesus Christ our Lord, amen.
Korea e kaitia pō mātua ringi, amen.
Thank you. And just remind everyone to turn off their mobile devices. We'll put them on silent. Toilets are out here on the right, going out, and the fire exit, if we need to be going out, is out along to the right and down the stairs there, and we'll assemble out on the front there. And if anyone, we know if there's an earthquake, drop cover hold, and if anyone needs any assistance to get out, please let governments know. Okay. We begin, we have no apologies, all here this afternoon. And we now move, if there's any changes to the declaration of interest, there, and can you let governance or ourselves know? And we now move to item 3, which is the public forum with members of the public who wish to speak. And our first speaker is Fabian. Kate.
Just before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the Chaney Milnes who passed away. Great loss to our community. For those who don't know us, us or we in this, all of us. It's like a watered down well. Well is such a strong word in our opinion. We believe both from our council and government perspective, whether due to their actions or how they have directed. He felt public has lost had lots of media over mayors and councils complaining, pointing fingers and showing messages this time, but not much of what it really meant to our communities. Meanwhile, while the big team players pointed fingers, we knew the community was left wondering questions like, will we have water meters? How much will it cost? When will this happen? How will it work? What about the flowing rate of the river? People needing extra showering and washing, disabled. Will there be a grant for water? Comments like, but my friends in Kapiti, I'll turn the Toby off and get my water from the river. Well, there goes the kids' poll. Average wage. I'm a pensioner. I'm nowhere near that figure. Environmental concerns. Comments and concerns flowed. See our document 1. And there were pages, much more than that. And we tried to answer as many of them as we could. Doing our best, but still we believe many unanswered, both for community and councils. The 12th of February 2025 meeting was concerning. Many questions and concerns from our elected members. Voting continued to move forward. The mayor at the end of the meeting commented on how quiet the team was. It was very telling. For the public, water meters, average wage, and the nasty indicative $7 a day from the Scott report, to name a few. Trying to share information on Facebook and printed material we took to share, being blocked off by mods on Facebook, threats, nasty comments, and even blocked by our own council site. Our printer and our wallets are looking forward to a break. What kept us going was those that appreciated our attempts. Thank you. So we do empathise with the council to a point. Over the past year, we have attended the Weaving the Harakeke Hui started last year by Heather Blissett. She encouraged us, and so a Facebook page and a new page we created. We honestly had no idea what we were doing, but with 2,225 people who had signed the rates petition, we had to try again over water. Even when told by an elected member that we were too passionate and should step away, our opinion, you can never be too passionate about your community and what you love. We felt out of our depth with 2 elected members there who attended regularly and informing us on as far back as we might be September 2024. Even bringing along the CEO twice, whom we would like to take this time to apologise for how we conducted ourselves earlier in the LTP. We put an insight into water done well, and the way you listened to the questions and concerns and addressed them were amazing. Thank you. See document 2. Also, the treasurer who took the time to attend the hui. We have had threats, nasty comments, but we have survived on those that have appreciated and given us feedback. No standing orders or code of conduct to protect us. We had admitted if we had worded something wrong, not made excuses or thrown others under the bus, especially if we knew we were not squeaky clean with what we had done. It has been a hard journey for us, but today we can breathe again. From our point of view, there are so many questions still unanswered, including councillor, who during the annual plan YouTube meeting said they had updated data. You'll see that. We're still waiting. And the run around and play on words afterwards is frustrating. Then there was the projected that you have now. We're concerned that is going to be also taken the same as the average for the rates, where the price will change and move around and we will feel much. To finish, if it is possible, we are realistic and we know some people like us. Some people do not. But we'd like to take this time to apologise to those who we have approached, we've stressed, we've angered, and we've frustrated. But it has been out of sheer urgency to try and get as much information as we could. And those that understood that we were 2 people inexperienced doing what we could, and understand the schedule positive feedback to us at what we've done. And as we always say, if council has done well, we call it, and if they do not, we call it. In this case, we thank you, Councillor Tracy Ultra, Deputy Helen Swales, along with Jeff Swanson and Kate Thompson. It's been a ride and a half. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for that. Is there any question?
Thank you, Kate, for coming along and presenting and asking us questions and giving us a commentary. I know this document that we put out for public consultation and our agenda is quite a weighty document to read. But what I'd like you to do and probably do some analysis on is on page 228 of this document. It's called Appendix C12, Projected Charges for Residential Households. It's got Wellington, it's got Hutt City, Porirua and Upper Hutt City Council, and it might give you some indication, but they are only projected costs there, which you might want to have a look at and do some stuff on. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thanks. The next speaker is Paul Fabian. Paul.
That's fine.
Good afternoon all. We've been watching local water done well since Deputy Mayor Swales raised it with the community at the Weaving the Harakeke in September last year. It has been very frustrating trying to understand, share with the community information that sometimes wasn't even there. This has included indicative costs they will need to plan for to try and absorb within their wages, which are in no way increasing at the rate that water, rates and other daily expenses are. This has been highlighted for some time that community affordability has not been at the forefront of this endeavour, but affordability of the program to sort an ailing infrastructure has been the priority. After looking through this delivery plan, there are many questions which still need to be answered, and I'll try and quickly run through a few. Debt transfer. I note on page 181 there are 2 options for the transfer of debt to Metro Water. I cannot see a decision that has been made which method will be used, nor how each option will be affecting the Upper Hutt City Council's debt and thus rates requirement. especially when assets will have been transferred and handed over on day one. Additional expenditure. What's with the additional expenditure noted on page 71? How does this affect the funding requirements from Upper Hutt itself? There does not seem to be any reference to how much this is or how it will affect the Upper Hutt community. Representation. How much representation will Upper Hutt get on this new Metro Water Board, whatever we're calling it? Will it be a one council, one vote? Or will we once again be the poor cousins and be outvoted in a single swipe? Impact on renters. Over this entire year, there have been minimal to no information that we have seen for the renters of our city. We have spoken to many renters who believe this will not impact them and are oblivious. However, reality is that landlords will pass on these costs. Where is the communication to our renters in our community that this will have an effect on them also? Page 85 of the Water Services Delivery Plan states around landlords and renters and the residential tenants. 3.3% to 3.4% of the median household wage. Oh, we got back flat for this one. On the 30th of June, the draft report stated that the projected cost for by 2034 would be 3.3% of the median household income. Now, 2 months later, the projection has increased by 0.1%. 0.1% doesn't sound like much, but it equates to 58 cents per day or $211 per year uplift on top of what is already an exponential increase in water costs. So I've added a few graphs in my document there. You can have a look at those later. Currently, council water policy. Disconnect, and you'll still be charged 50% if you're within 100 metres of a water supply. It has been highlighted that as part of the long-term plan, a clause around water charges if property is within 100 metres of a water supplied water. Is this still valid under this delivery plan? Can or will the council still have this ability going forward? Rates excluded properties. Are those who are included in the Local Government Rating Act 2002's non-rateable land liable for water charges under this new legislation? If not, are all the other water users expected to pay for their connections and their volumetric usage of the water? Rates impact. What will the impact be on the rates requirement and thus the rates payable by the community? I don't seem to be able to see how all this plan will affect the community. How much of the rates reduction will there be when water is removed? Obviously, not enough to cover the new charges, but where is the plan? Where are the figures? From a council meeting on the 30th of June 2025, it looks like confusion reigned as execs seem to contradict themselves. And to be honest, I don't blame them. I've added a few links in there. With assets being transferred on day one, debt transfer method unknown, impact of additional expenditure above the LTP levels, and the uncertainty of upcoming rate capping, what does all this mean for your community? The community who have elected you to be their voice. For those in this room who have assisted to enable our small part in sharing information with the Upper Hutt community, I thank you. To the others, you're elected to represent our community. How can you do that without gaining their informed opinion? There are still so many questions unanswered. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Carson?
Thank you, Luke. Coming on. Have you ever been in a maze without a map?
Yes.
What it feels like at this time.
And I respect that.
And I just refer you to, if you had time to look at page 126 of the document.
So it was 126.
Yeah, where the median 126, where the median, where the water services charge as a percentage of household income, which is the median average wage, is predicted to be, starts off at 1.4 in 25, and then it gradually rises to 3.4 in the last 10th year.
Yep. Which was reported as 3.3% in the June.
Yeah, but it gradually increases, right?
No. Sorry. I just want to clarify that. In the report that was presented to council on the 30th of June, that 2034 figure was 3.3%. It's now 3.4%.
Yeah, because the figures have been refined, so But the next council needs to work out just what will be the maximum rates, so that's free water goes, so that'll be an interesting story. I'll be watching from the sideline.
You those.
I just want to say thank you for coming along and pointing out and giving reference to pages where you've found questions that you want answers to. I have to say that some of those questions were raised in our Risk and Finance Committee meeting that was held last week. And the reference, Risk and Insurance Councillor, and I think it's very much like what Councillor Carson says. We are going through a minefield without a map, and we're trying to be as informative as we can to the community, but we're blindfolded as much as you are. But there are a whole host of questions, I'm sure, that are going to come up when we start debating the table. But thank you for your questions.
Thank you for the recognition that the council is hamstrung as well.
Any other questions? Thank you, Paul. Thanks. Speaker is Heather Blissett. Heather?
I'd just like to acknowledge I don't envy your job at the moment, and I realise it's like pushing water up a hill. But I want to keep it simple because I did look at that. It's actually, there's a lot of good things in that document. There's a lot of challenging things and some unknowns, but it's quite a lengthy document. So I'll keep it simple. And I've just highlighted a couple of things. The development contributions versus ratepayer costs. On page 38, the future urban areas, i.e. greenfields, and they mentioned Silverstream Forest, St Patrick's mixed-use precinct, and Gillespie's block, as requiring connection to water and other infrastructure. Silverstream Forest is located on a ridgeline alongside other semi-off-grid sections. Blue Mountains, for example, only receives power connection, no other services. If this changes, who will pay for the cost to deliver water connections to the development? These developments are future focused. It's my understanding that Upper Hutt charge all developers a fixed price development contribution fee regardless of the costs incurred to the ratepayer towards infrastructure. Now, I may have that wrong, but that's my understanding. Page 80, growth pays for growth. A development contribution levy is proposed. This has not been determined by government yet, so it's still an unknown. And on page 218, the development contributions for Upper Hutt are not included in the financial long-term plan. Also on 218 is the modelling development contributions, where it says development contributions have been calculated to ensure that the debt balance is equal to zero at the end of the capacity life. And then on page 64, the national policy statement for national hazards decision making may cost more for at-risk areas, example flooding and landslides. Protective cost pressures not included yet. So my question is, who pays? Ensuring that these costs are paid for by developers and not ratepayers. And I just, in that moment, I also just want to just remind you that we declined Maidstone Terrace as housing when it was formerly intensive housing, and it's along a corridor, it meets all the criteria, and yet I don't understand why that's still in a water document with a lot of unknowns when there would be increased costs and it doesn't meet the intensive criteria. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to put these under the subtitle of climate change because I know it's a word that makes a lot of people cringe. But some points to note, they talk about the risk of sea level rising. Then I question the millions that have been spent around the Wellington Harbour, along between Petone and Wellington and around Eastbourne. Why are we spending that kind of money on shared pathways if sea level rise is a concern? The Waifatu aquifer, my understanding is that the water enters the harbour some metres out from the beach. The risk of a backwash of salt water is not due to sea level rising, but a reduction in the natural flow of water going out. And that's because we're concreting things and water's now going down stormwater drains instead of the natural hydraulic neutrality, which means it soaks in through the ground and feeds the water table. So our water table is ebbing as well. Now that I'm not a science, that's just my learned understanding. 30% growth is mentioned throughout the document. There is no mention of what this equates to in water take. Resilience is measured in longevity and the strength of the infrastructure and financial costs, no mention is made that I could see that safeguarded the level of the take on our water. So that 30% growth, does that mean 30% extra water from our storage areas? My concern is that we are masking codependency for resilience. True resilience is when most people can still access good, healthy water and power in a major system fail for a sustained period. In the case of water, the survival window is much less than the need for power. The technology is constantly evolving. So I just question why we're not looking at sustainable building practices that mean that if anything happens, we can still operate with drinking water. Page 40, B5.1, I'm nearly done. Managing pressures on the water supply system. Mentions an extra lake for storage in Tapuatahi. Would be great to see the inclusion of water systems on households, collecting rain to flush toilet and water and wash clothes, for example. Charging and billing. Page 198, the forecast cost per connection is $579 per year. For those not connected to water, the available charge is 50%. So even if you're not connected to water, if you are near a what do they call it? A connection site, then the fee is $289.50 a year. I just wonder. So we need to include more incentives for people to use less water and less pressure on the infrastructure. Residents should be able to choose whether they are connected to or not, as long as they are able to provide evidence that they are collecting, storing and or eliminating water in an appropriate way. The technology is constantly evolving. At worst, the benefits include zero take on existing sources. And finally, I just want to say, and I know we've heard it a million times, we're exhausted, there's a cost of living crisis. So people are already, and I say begging because I don't know any other word, we're struggling to feed. And so the last thing we need to be doing is begging for water as well. That's me. Thank you.
Any questions? Would you be last?
I just want to congratulate the three people that have presented so far. You've obviously read the document, which is quite hefty and quite technical, and being able to respond to different parts of it, bringing a different place here. There are a number of resilient things that are lacking in this paper. So hopefully we'll discuss it when it comes to councillors. So thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather. Our next speaker is Elaine Chaney. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've never done this before, so if I muck it up, excuse me, do all. There's no council speak in it, but I don't speak council. My name is Elaine Chaney. I'm 80 years old and I came to Upper Hutt to live after my husband of 51 years died and I found out I had been betrayed financially. The decision to downsize my home and move to Upper Hutt on the 1st of July 2016 was made purely and simply in order to survive, have a roof over my head, and leave me with a very tiny nest egg for unforeseen emergencies. When I moved into Upper Hutt, I settled in quickly, joined several volunteer organisations, and slowly rebuilt my life. I grew to love Upper Hutt and looked forward to spending my twilight years here. During my entire adult life, I have always paid my bills on time and never had a bad debt. I still have two very small paid jobs, giving me an extra $3,500 a year. That's what the pension was, which has enabled me to enjoy a modest standard of living, and by being frugal, I have been able to afford to make some necessary improvements to my little home. However, the looming local waters done well issue is clearly going to drastically change and could even destroy my precarious financial situation. When I first learned about the water issue, I believed that there would be at worst the scenario of $7 a day, $50 a week, charge for water, possibly less as I live alone and use a lot less water than the average household. I foolishly believed that having a meter, paying a base pipe charge, and then only paying for my actual water usage on top, I might be able to get by. The reality is, the way things seem to be going, that will not be the case. I fear that as meters will be a long time coming to all households, there will likely be a dreaded average cost applied, where I will have to pay for more water than I use. And just in brackets, the average rate increase of just over 19% announced in the 24-25 rate year actually came out to be just under 25% in my case. But I'm just explaining about the average. The word average is now a dirty word to me. The prediction that with yearly increases to water charges, the average cost by 2034 may be over $7,000 a year is terrifying. If indeed this does happen, I, along with many thousands of others, will have given up and shuffled off this mortal coil. Our death certificates will probably show the cause of death of dehydration. So much for the vision of New Zealand, clean, green country.
Any questions, Elaine?
Thank you, Elaine. You did very well, not using council speak for the first time coming around the table. I think we got the message clear, that being on a fixed income, that you're going to struggle with the projected costs. So in the paper, as I mentioned before to Kate, on 228 and 230, where it starts talking about what it will go up to, might give you some indications, but they are only projected costs. They've yet to be landed.
This is it. It's the uncertainty and the fear.
Yeah, and I get that. So I know that there's a councillor around this table that's always banging on, you need to make sure that our comms are very, very good into the community, and that we need to, and she's smiling, that we need to make sure that we keep in front of this for the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you for coming to speak. So just by going for what you said here, you'd actually prefer that water meters were rolled out earlier so that you're only paying for what you use and
Yes.
not everyone else. Yeah.
Because I have this vision that my water meter might not come for 7 years.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'm paying that
You love that.
average, which is never going to favour me. And I'm not the only one. There's so many people that are in that situation. So sad, yes, so many people do not actually realise that water is coming.
Whereas the high users are probably hoping water meters never come because they get a bit more. Thanks, Elaine.
Any other councillor Carson?
Saying, but it's not only just water volume will be charged, it's all the other stuff as well, which is stormwater, and in the case which is case by Bahad, it's Seaview, and it's wastewater. So it's not just use of water that is drinking water, but it's all the other elements too, which are probably more costly and therefore will be charged on.
That's what I expect it to be in the base charge.
No, it won't be.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. I don't think it will be, but it depends how the new company calculates it. But
So how will the volumetric work then?
who knows? We'll wait and see. Rather hard, it's not predicted to happen. According to the plan.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
The last speaker in public is Teresa Homan. Teresa, welcome.
Thanks. Just got a couple of questions really, and at the risk of being a dog barking out the wrong tree, I want to ask you, an outgoing council, what is the urgency in making this decision to adopt the local Water Done Well Joint Services Delivery Plan that an incoming council will need to implement? I want to ask you why an outgoing council are allowing central government to force you into this decision before the 3rd of September, when central government and the minister are fully aware that you are an outgoing council and that we are in the end of the local body's election cycle. I ask that on this basis that you, an outgoing council, you do the right thing in a democratic process and defer this decision for the incoming council. Thank you.
The reason that the deadline is that we're following the law that the government set. I mean, if we don't make that decision today, I suspect that they will make it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suggest that as a council, I'll tell you what my mother would say, get a backbone and stand up. Thank you.
Hey, hang on, there might be some other questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that, can you? No.
I empathise with you, as do all of us around this council table, Teresa, but when legislation comes down and you don't make a decision, which is legally binding that we have to do by the 3rd of September, the likelihood of the commissioner is very possible that they will come in and take the choice away from us. So you can get a backbone and you can say, no, I'm going to walk away from this on the table. But the consequences, I think, are more dire for our community than actually us meeting the requirement that central government have given us. And we hear you. We think that everything that's happening at the moment is going at the speed that even we're not comfortable with. You've heard from other people that have spoken today. There are so many questions, and even from us as councillors, that we do not know today, but we have to make these decisions in good faith, hoping that when we make endorsements that the new council coming in can question or firm up the decisions that we make today, but not on the service delivery, but on the foundation documents.
I hear you, but I just want to reiterate, if the councils across New Zealand stood up, they could gain more time to make decisions without being stiff-armed tactics by this government. And that's, I hear you, and I understand what you're saying.
So those,
You can see that the some of the councils that haven't satisfied where they want to go have already had their letters written, have already been written to. So yeah.
and some councils have already submitted, particularly the Waikato, the ones in the north have already submitted their plans. Those locally, some have already made their decision and some will be making them today.
Everyone's made it now except us.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah, they have, everyone has except us, yeah.
But you've heard from all of these other people that they are concerned about what's going to happen. And I don't think the decision to agree to this has been made. And I mean, I know you've tried to consult the community, but the community was, I bet if you went out and asked the community, they wouldn't be aware of the ramifications of these decisions being made today.
The interesting thing is, from the point of view of the concerns that you've raised, has anyone bothered to contact the ministers?
Yeah.
Because that's, yeah, you have, yeah. Because it's, you know,
Anything back?
didn't hear back.
Or they say it's got nothing to do with us, you're in the Upper Hutt district.
Councillor Carey, that's a good way of passing the buck.
I guess the question is, and it's almost hypothetical when we look at the process, but what does saying no look like to you when we don't individually own the source, the treatment, the wastewater treatment, any of the infrastructure other than the network that sits in the ground here?
I absolutely understand that we have to pay. Someone somewhere has to pay for this, but I don't think that you are getting a fair deal from government who are saying you must make these decisions, but they're not giving you any help to implement them or any, and I just feel that councils across New Zealand should be saying, you know, hang fire until we know what you're putting into this.
Councillor Carey.
Well, thanks. I understand. I guess, what are your thoughts on the fact that councils haven't for decades now, and we're in this situation?
It's stunning to me that the councils have not paid for the infrastructure that's required. I'm sorry for everyone here who you know, I'm not blaming any of you, but I just can't believe we're in such dire straits, really. And I do think that this should be extrapolated over many more years. And I think it's 10 you're talking about. I think there are people coming in the future who will benefit from these, you know, new pipes and all the things that are required. And really we should find a way to not. I mean, we have to pay our share, but I think the future.
No, I can assure you, you're talking there that the fact that the implementation of this comes at a big cost too. Councillor Finch.
Thank you, Your Worship. Teresa, just on what you said there about extrapolate this over multiple years, are you mean paying for the infrastructure when you say that? Well, because most of this almost all of this will be debt funded, so it will be extrapolated over the life of those assets. So we're not paying for it all up front, and the people who come later you could free ride out of it.
Sorry, I, over how many years are you?
Well, so the debt will be assigned to the life of the asset. So if the treatment plant lasts 50 years, you'll pay that off over 50 years.
Good.
And then you pay the principal per year. Yeah, so it's not like anyone later will get a free ride. It will be.
I'm not suggesting people get a free ride. I think.
No, I know what you meant, but yeah.
But we need to make it payable by all the people who are going to that increase. And I mean, the government should at least give us back the GST.
Absolutely.
Well, the thing about it, once it's set up, is that you won't be able to you won't be coming to this table to do it, because the reality of it is council will have very little input.
Absolutely, and now I think that is detrimental.
Your Worship, can I just add to something that Councillor Bentley said, that under Appendix 13, council-specific investment outcomes is actually landed for the different councils over that period of time of prediction that you might find, and it's over 30 years, 10 years, and then 30 years. So you might find that an interesting read, and that starts on page 232 of the document. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Okay, let's now move to item 4, which is the adoption of the local water done well joint water services delivery plan and endorsement of the Water Services Council Control Organisation Foundation documents. The comments and questions, Ms. Files?
Your Worship, before we open it up to maybe even comments and questions, I'd like an explanation of what endorsement of the Water Services Council Control Organisation Foundation documents mean. So when we're endorsing them, does that mean that there's no more conversation, that we leave it to officers or whoever the elected member is on that committee to make all those questions that we possibly have when we get to them around the table will be done? Or do we get the opportunity? Because I just want some clarity about endorsement. What does that mean? And do we get another bite of the cherry?
The endorsement decisions relate to the recommendations D through to H. And D particularly notes that what the endorsements say are draft versions reflecting decisions or input, discussions, direction provided by the 5 councils collectively to date on those foundation documents and principles. It is to endorse it at this point as it stands, for it to go forward for further work through over the coming months. Different documents will be dealt with slightly differently. There is some more urgency to finalise, for example, the constitution for the new thing in order to establish that. And that is where the delegated authority to the advisory oversight group members is relevant and was sought. So that something like the constitution and the partners agreement can be progressed in particular as a result of the election period mainly. The intention across all 5 councils is that those documents will come back to councils to ratify post-election. And again, they'll be potentially at slight stages at that point. But very much what is presented today are drafts based on direction and discussion thus far across all 5 councils in order to kind of mark a point in time for the work to continue on that from here.
Just to follow on from that, so when you say that it comes back and it's ratified, to me that says that we're ticking the box and we're saying that that's it. That in between this election period, I have to go with what one of our people in public forum said, that we're being rushed, that actually the opportunity of elected people then to have an input, because we're going to give delegated authority, and not that I have an issue with the delegated authority to do that, but I believe that there's too many unknowns in here that as elected people we should be able to understand the progress and how we got to the document that we're going to ratify if we are unable to make any changes to that document. I think these foundation documents are the ones that are going to be, because when will they be reviewed? In 30 years' time or whenever? Or are they going to be sitting there? Because the only document that will get reviewed, right, is the letter of expectation. So I just think that we, whoever is around this table after the election, need to have the opportunity to actually feather it out rather than just say, okay, it's done and it's a fait accompli.
But that'll be up to that council to determine that.
I know, your worship, but my concern is that if we're ratifying it, we're just ratifying it,
Well, the
we're
new-
not discussing
but
it
the
to
new
make
council-
changes.
Well, the new council will
Yeah.
do that.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm saying, can we debate it? Can we make changes? No.
Through you, Chair. I guess post-election, there are elements of the work that will be focused on the Partners Committee, which is to be established with council representatives, continue it. How the interaction is and how influence from corporate councils feeding into that process is not locked down or excluded from the process. So in the period from the election through to next potentially final iterations of documents coming back for ratification, I guess there is a process that we'll be following in order to continue these documents from where they are today through to ratification. So I guess this council post-election has opportunity to participate in that in an appropriate form that we can facilitate within the timeframes available. If there are some limitations on timeframes for some of the elements, like I said, the constitution in particular needs to be locked in slightly earlier, and thus the delegation to finalise that, and that's related to the legal establishment of the entity. Something like the statement of expectations, the timeframe around that is quite critical, because under the legislation that has to be issued to the entity 6 months in advance of the year that it relates to for its first water services strategy. And so there's a couple of sort of domino effects there. So the statement of expectations is the other one that has a very historical time frame around it. But in short, I guess post-election, between the election council being established through the new training, through to the ratification, I guess there is a process. But exactly what that looks like, I haven't got the perfect detail other than to say there should be some opportunity to some input that provides assurance or reassurance in some form.
Okay, any further comments, any questions? Councillor Carey, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I guess, are we just starting at attachments
Yeah.
or starting at attachments? I suppose on attachment 2, I guess, where it's laid out all the asset management systems and it's kind of, it's mentioned as a risk, but with the ability to, it's on page 51, is the sort of asset management systems. What is the plan for getting clarity on all the data and how that works? It led to me it's risks in terms of costings and ongoing maintenance and status of the assets. What is the plan there to bring all that data together, work it out, and who is doing that work?
Really, yeah. What is presented in the water service delivery plan is not an asset management plan or an investment plan. It is a starting point. We, I guess, hand it over to the new water organisation to then commence further work. The responsibility for sort of detailed asset management work and planning associated with that will sit with the new entity. And that will link through to its accountabilities and obligations to create some things like the water services strategy. That's quite a key document. So the water services strategy is essentially sort of an equivalent to what's in the long-term plan currently for water services, and also elements of an asset management plan. So it's got prescribed content, prescribed process around it, and as I said, is a legal requirement. So this plan is not intended to provide the detail of what that looks like. But who's going to do the work? I guess that comes back to the process and the time frame around looking to establish the entity within the months in order to get that up and running and prepare for the operation by 26. And I guess in the long term, that work in terms of technical asset management planning, etc., will also
Any other questions?
Just to follow on to what councillor Kerry said, because it's on page 47. So when we look at Upper Hutt's assets, right, which is on page 47, and we look at the water supply, the wastewater, stormwater, I suppose what we would like to know is that's the base that we've handed over of what our assets are. And when we look at the value of them, have we critiqued that, and is that what is compliant with what we've got if we were to look at it's insured for those values? There are a whole host of things that these are our assets, this is what we've valued it at, this is what we've handed over. And is this the baseline that we've critiqued and we're happy with? Because when these assets go into the pool with everybody else, which we've got a breakdown in here of everything else, it's going to actually feed into the work program of OPEX and CAPEX.
Through you, Richard. Are we happy? We've provided everything as an input basis. We had evaluations done during this year.
Yeah.
They've been done by a valuer, the same valuer as Wellington City and Hutt City use, so we have commonality there. So they're a good input start and current valuations. On the matter of insurance, you'll see later on in the document, there's assumptions around insurance. This council currently carries insurance. There's a level of self-insurance we carry. I see the new entity is assuming that that's the same principle they will adopt. And so this is all a starting point, but this is the best information Upper Hutt City Council has to hand over at this point in time. So I'm very comfortable to stand here and say we've done as much due diligence, if I can put it that way, on the information we've handed over for the creation of the site.
Councillor Kerry. And then Councillor Ultra.
Yeah, thanks. I guess one of the questions I asked in the last briefing we had on this was around resilience. So we've got the keep up, catch up, or keep up, build up, clean up sort of approach and resilience, and the build up around having an additional storage lake in that plan. I ask, how does that align with resilience when we're talking, natural hazards, earthquake, everything in one geographic location? The question wasn't answered, and it still sits there in the plan. And has that been considered? Is there any thoughts on that as to big picture thinking here? How resilient is a third lake in the same location as the two existing lakes when you look at our natural hazard scape around the region?
I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to answer it from that viewpoint. And I'll defer to others who are. I think for the purposes of this exercise, what has been included is the cost of a third lake. So it is developing a catchment of cost and investment that is the most that this region can handle to deliver a third lake. Now, the unknown is whether that third lake gets delivered going forward, because we are not responsible for that. We're not. So it's about the modelling of the financial costs that can be afforded because it's financial sustainability.
Thanks, through your worship. I guess acknowledge that and acknowledge we don't have the control. How do we feed back into that at this point? Because once it's almost a plan on a page and it becomes just accepted that that is the long term, how do we get the concern on the table around this?
I think the best place to capture sort of a high level outcomes, if it's specifically focused on outcomes, and there's maybe high level operations there, the best place to capture those outcomes would be through the certification process, because that is the high level document that sets up direction at an outcome level, because that is direct legislation. So it can't specify projects, for example, or even the word priorities, I believe, have been changed through legislation. So at an outcomes level, the councils have opportunity to set some direction. How the entity then gives attention to that is what the water service strategy is about. And there is a requirement that the strategy gives effect to the statement of expectations. I guess, again, if you take it down to the next level, practically what does the project look like? Where is it? How is it built? You don't quite have that linear link through here. So it's really quite outcomes focused.
The new board will be looking at that too, I suspect. Councillor Ultra.
Thank you. I just wanted to know about, so on page 5, we've got H, which is endorsing the principles for assisting Metro Water. And in attachment 8, it talks about value for money and transparent pricing. And so initially that's going to be charged out. There'll be a pricing set up through council. So the rates bill will come through and have that metro charge on it. So we'll be managing the charges initially. I'm just wondering from this, it says that in addition, water services bill will require Metro Water to at least once a year publish a list setting out the water services charges that apply. So we won't actually get any sort of say in what sort of pricing. It will be them, and we'll just be the ones putting the charges out. So therefore, there could be an issue with communications as well. Would that be on us as well to communicate with the community and let people know where the new pricings are coming from and
With it. Metro Water, as it's been interim, will be responsible for undertaking its own billing and its own pricing. This is a model, a plan to enable that to commence. And in the interim, it is likely that councils will continue to do the billing until Metro Water sets itself up. That billing is in the early stage of being developed as to how it will operationalise. And I think the best way to think about it is it will be similar to how Great Wellington rates get charged at the moment. You will get charged, ratepayers will be charged for Upper Hutt rates, Greater Wellington rates, and there will be a separate bill. And whether that bill comes at the same time or at a different cycle, it's yet to be determined. But for a year or so, there will be a separate bill, which will be for Metro Water. And it'll be separately identified and based on the long-term plan figures at the moment.
So yeah, clearly, thank you. From a political point of view, Tracy, Councillor Otley, you'll probably find that when the bill goes out at the same time or under the initial reaction will be we're the ones imposing the charges. But yeah, there'll be an exercise in saying, well, it's nothing to do with us. Okay, any other questions?
Your Worship, going through the appendices as we're moving through them, and to carry on with what Councillor Carson said around climate resiliency and things like that, I'm going to
Sorry, was it Councillor Carey?
Sorry, Kerry. Sorry.
That's the right step.
Thank you. So Councillor Kerry, and it goes to Appendix C1, which starts on page 173. But if you go looking at the uncertainties, and it does allude to climate change and to page 177, sorry, uncertainties, and it talks about there is no agreed level of service for flooding or existing habitable floors, which we know that we've got flooding as a concern here, along with earthquakes. And then in number 4, under the uncertainties, it talks about having to relocate. Now, it's not only our 3rd or 4th water provider, but it also looks at, we know that rising sea level with our wastewater treatment plant at Seaview and the amount of money invested in that, and see anywhere where we would be looking at doing those. So if we're looking at a 30-year plan and it says Metro Water may face new capital and operational investment and requirements to upgrade and relocate vulnerable. you know, when do we actually get those in that long-term plan of assets and renewals or capital expenditure that they're looking at? Because I think those things need to come up when I look at the life expectancy that we've been given for Seaview and the investment needs to go in there.
There'll be decisions a new board makes. They'll be
But
the
that is
issues.
at a cost.
Well, absolutely, anything can come at a cost, even if we were doing it. But the fact of the matter, those are the decisions that the new directors will be making.
Yeah, I guess the that again, in a similar way to giving effect to the resilience around where a future water storage really may go or another source of water. It's in the same category in terms of that will be decisions that will be made, specific investment decisions and plans for those sorts of projects down the track.
And I can assure you, being involved in the interviews of the new directors last week, they all understand the risks that are involved.
And I suppose the reason why I bring it up, Your Worship, is that when you look at the modelling that goes over, you know, for the 30 years, and we ended up, as Councillor Carson said, at 3.4% increase, does that factor in some of those things that need to be put across with regard to those figures that are there? I know they're only projected figures, but it would be nice to know if that's factored in there.
Through Your Worship, I mean, I think I would direct councillors to Appendix C5, because the modelling does include an allowance for insurance and risk management in a similar way to how we as a council approach it. So, for example, they have looked at a 1 in 1,000 year event and put that into the modelling. So the figure of 3.4% of household income includes that type of thing and allowance.
I have another one on that. So that's good to know, because I did have a question on risk management and insurance, which is future clarification of this matter is critical for the future water organisation, which is the last question or statement above the current arrangements. But I'd like to now go back to a question that which is Appendix C3, financing and debt arrangement, and it goes 181, and it does go to the page of the options. We're given 2 options, but are we going to make a decision today as to which option we prefer, or who's going to make that decision as to what option we go with?
Through Your Worship, that is still being worked through. That is for a discussion for the entity with LGFA. Sorry, I'm getting my acronyms wrong. LGFA, which is still in discussion.
Sorry, one other question in that particular. I'm going to page 182, and it talks about adjustment for Wellington City Council, and it's in the second paragraph, and it starts, without adjustment, this would leave Wellington City Council in a comparatively weak financial position post-transfer with reduced borrowing capacity for non-water priorities. In December 2024, Wellington City Council agreed to regional model being their preferred option on the condition that they receive in principle support from AOG for their equitable debt transfer position ahead of consultation. What does that mean?
That's been discussed here before. That had been discussed here before.
I would like it discussed again today, just to make sure that I understand what it means.
Through Your Worship, that has been to this council before, and it was part of those discussions back in December, earlier in the year. Sorry, I forget the time. The issue that arose is Wellington City did not have clarity of absolute clarity around categorisation of their debt. They have had a number of professional services firms assess what their debt is, and they've worked out methodology. And they've arrived at a figure, and that is the figure that is water-related debt that must go to the water entity. Wellington City have publicly argued that they could have put the sludge levy into a different funding mechanism, which could have created the same outcome. I think it's been debated in public quite widely, the issue. And like I say, it was brought to this council earlier in the year.
Your worship, it still doesn't explain the in principle.
They asked for in principle support for that, so that all the calculations could include their increase in percent. But yeah.
Sorry. So in principle, if we're going along to look at the level of debt when we sit around the table and we look at all debt from all 5 entities that are in this partnership, will it affect the borrowing that we're able to do? And will it affect any other decisions that are made around the table?
I can't actually answer that question. It means that Wellington City came to the entity with more debt than they would have otherwise, and all other councils agreed to that. And so what is on page 183 there is the total debt opening and the opening debt that the new take on.
Yeah. Thank you, councillor Kerry, then councillor Ben.
Thanks, your worship. Sorry, taking it away slightly from that into the equity piece. The statement of expectations, principle 4 talks about this being a public good and restriction of water as a last sort of resort. And then in page 85 on the draft plan, it talks about it would be expected that the Metro Water will consider formalised affordability hardship frameworks, things as sort of flexible payment plans, concession tariffs, grants, those sort of things. How do we strengthen the language on that? Because the expectation really only talks to restriction as a last resort. This in the plan feels like weasel words that they'll consider those options, but they don't actually have to look at it.
Through you, Chair. I guess things like restriction of supply is regulated and legislated for beyond anything that shareholding councils can establish through implementation documents or ongoing instruments such as statement of expectations. That is set in the legislative framework. And so I guess that's the foundation documents are not intended to duplicate or replicate everything that is also the underlying regulation and legislation set up to which the water entity is subject. If there are specific, and the principle in the statement of expectations area is intended to speak to the fact that that is a priority for the shareholding councils. And I guess that also flows through into some of the principle of the council charter. So there are elements there that the councils are signalling as a priority and are looking to build in where they can, but those are not the only obligations on the entity. There is also regulation and legislation that sits outside that.
Councillor Ben.
Thank you, Richard. Just want to clarify on the Wellington debt transfer thing. Is it correct that Wellington don't ring fence their debt to activity type, they rather than a central treasury debt that they run? And when they sold assets years ago, they paid down the debt. So based on their water income compared to their debt, they actually have very low debt to their revenue. Hence why they're asking for that adjustment now.
Thank you, councillor. You've explained it beautifully.
Yeah. And another question. I keep hearing this thing about rural connections being charged 50% if they're near a toby or within a certain distance of a toby. But when you read the document read the part of the document that talks about it here, it says this is the current approach of Upper City Council. So is that true that if you're near a toby, you get charged a to be connected fee? What is the arrangement going on?
Through your worship, that's the current when I set up the plan, that's how it works. If you can be connected, then you will be charged 50%.
what is the arrangement going forward that's not for,
Yeah, that requirement isn't a peculiar one to Upper Hutt. That's actually in the Local Government Act, the 1974 version. There are some bits of that that still apply, and that's where it is.
Councillor Ultra.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask about the ownership structure on page 76. And it's attachment 1. Time to find it. So the ownership structure is all councils owning this water entity. But it's got on the next page, on page 90, it says that that there'll be a draft agreed by councils and mana whenua partners ahead the incorporation of Metro Water on day 0, which is October 2025, and finalised in late 2025. So that's another item there that we actually really don't know what we're agreeing to today, being the ownership structure, and what will it mean for, like, we've got all the current, all of us ratepayers contributing to water costs. This is supposed to be public ownership, and so I'm just wondering how that's going to work when we don't even know how this is going to be set up.
Through you, Chair. What that refers to, the statement about the documents being set up for day 0 and finalised late 2025, that is exactly the foundation documents that are being discussed and presented today for endorsement. So in particular there, it refers to the constitution, so the ownership arrangements for the company, because it'll be a company, will be set in the constitution. So that is known, but that is the shareholding, the governance arrangement, those sorts of frameworks, that is known as per the documents presented today in its current draft form, subject to further work over the coming months.
But there could still be changes to that.
Not fundamentally to the ownership structure. There's essentially only one option, and that's the councils are the shareholders. Things like share allocation is still being discussed as a matter the partners agreement. The exact details of that and a number of options have been put to councils for that. But in principle, there is no other options being discussed. The council will be largely guided by standard sort of companies law establishment and from a legal sense for the company as per the constitution.
Councillor Carson.
Yeah, just a point of clarification for Councillor Ultra. The councils will not own any water assets. The only thing they will own will be shares in the company. It's the company that owns the water assets and its liabilities. The council is handing it all over, and the only thing it has is shares in the company.
Okay, finally,
Sorry, stormwater. So we have a project called Pine Haven Stormwater. And I'd like to know, because all through the conversations, not that they've been lots of conversations on stormwater, that I'm really unclear as to where we've landed with regard to stormwater, because the initial cost said that anything in main trunk lines stayed with council. But this particular one is actually, we're responsible for some of it, and some of it is responsible from the water entity. How do we deal with issues where we've got shared responsibility there? And has that conversation taken place?
it's early days.
Through you can, my colleague to jump in on the financial aspect. It has been, as the project stands and the contributing funding from the councils at the moment, that has been included in the modelling. So from a financial perspective, it is part of the plan. In terms of the practical operational arrangements around stormwater, there was a recent briefing for elected members that I guess the key message was that there is a lot of work to be done on stormwater in terms of the mechanics of it, the operationalizing it. Apologies. And that is acknowledged across the 5 councils. The plan presents, as best it can, based on current information, a high-level approach to stormwater. The details of that and the other waters and the functions and the assets and liabilities, services, everything transferring, and what that will look like between councils and the new entity is yet to be worked through in detail over the next month or so. Leading up to the go live date, and that will be set through an instrument called the transfer agreement, which is set through legislation and specifies how all of that needs to be broken down and set out in quite minute detail for us to get to that point of things actually transferring to the entity. But stormwater is acknowledged as an area of ongoing complexity and uncertainty and requiring significant work. This plan presents a high-level approach to that, signalling that that is best information available at the moment.
I understand and appreciate that high-level expectations, and this is the level that we're at, but it still brings us back to, you know, there's not enough detail, I don't think, for us to make an informed decision. And then when I listen to the very beginning of this conversation around when do we have the opportunity as elected members to actually participate, when there are so many pieces of work that are still unknown, particularly around stormwater, and we have a shared prospect there. I just think that sometimes maybe over Pinehaven, which I've been following quite rigorously dating back to 2016, that some of those assets will be handed over and some are going to be responsible for us to do. I get that. But are we going to be in the situation of the new entity is going to dictate when that work takes place, and then we've got to follow with it and find out that we've got to match it or whatever. I mean, you know, there's a breakdown here. What are we responsible for and what are they responsible for, and what it's going to look like in our work program now that it's been handed over. And when do we actually get to see what the transfer document is going to look like for us as a council? Those are things that I think are really, really important, because next year we start looking at our next LTP.
Just on the last, through your chair, on the last, the transfer agreement, as I said, is set through legislation, and that is quite a detailed piece of work that is yet to come. Even the process for exactly how they can complete it and what sort of approvals or otherwise there are is still being developed. I guess it is also an agreement between the new entity and the 5 councils. So the new entity have, I guess, a role in, you know, shaping or not shaping necessarily, but it is a two-way agreement. They have to be accepting of the what is transferring to them, and vice versa, I guess, you know, what stays with councils or not. So it is quite a complex piece of work. I'm sorry, I can't answer the question any further than that in terms of the detail of stormwater. Whether Kate has anything further in terms of the funding arrangements to add.
Oh, sorry, your worship. Explicitly on Pinehaven, if you remember in the annual plan for 25-26, there are monies there for carrying that project on. Yeah. And I know Tim's chomping at the bit to get progress moving. If we go back to page 182 of my document, or 78, the net debt transfer from Upper Hutt is 49 million. And the indicative debt is 106 million that we've transferred. Part of that debt transfer is built on the understanding that we will have completed. So that we have assumed that we will have completed the next stage of Pinehaven as per the annual plan. So
the figures here include an assumption that the annual plan of 25-26 will be delivered.
Thank you for that. So just capturing everything that has been said, knowing that it's a complex piece of legislation that has yet not been landed, knowing that
The legislation's been landed. The legislation's been landed on storm.
No, I'm talking about the debt transfer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's not legislation.
No, but well, when the whatever hasn't been landed, if we go back and that needs to be known 6 months prior to when this entity starts, which is the 1st of July. But is that what I'm led to believe? No.
Through you, Chair, no, that is the water services strategy. So the statement of expectations needs to be issued 6 months in advance to give the entity 6 months to develop a water services strategy. So around the same period of probably early 2026, the first half, that the entity will be working on the water services strategy. We will also be working on the transfer agreement. So that, because it will sort of feed into that, because they have to know what in their strategy, what are they responsible for and what do they need to deliver and what do they own and so forth.
From the 1st
So
of July.
those two are sort of two pieces of work that have not commenced yet. Well, high level work on the transfer process is underway, but the details of that is still to come. And yeah, I guess I don't know if that answers the question.
Okay. Councillor Ridley.
Thank you. Your worship, on attachment 1, page 74 of the agenda on line 65 of the report, just about this covenant from LGFA. Yep. So 78 on the top, 76 on 65 on the bottom. Free fund from operations to debt.
Yeah.
So in that second table, we've got a FFO to interest ratio 2.0 times across. But that rate, the figure that's given as free funds from operations, is that after interest? Or is that before? Because it's given in that table up top. But otherwise, I think those ratios are off by a factor of 1 times. Because it showed there's no way that 70 million can service 69 million worth of interest 2 times over. It's more like 1.02 times. So that's a typo, isn't it? Yeah, so so in that last paragraph, it says there's a minimum covenant of 1.5 times interest cover ratio, or FFO interest coverage. They don't meet it comfortably. They actually don't meet it till year 2033, which could be a serious problem.
Thank you. Okay. You have the recommendations here in front of you. Recommendations, the adoption of the local water done well and the organisations. We have recommendations 3, A through to H. Happy to move. Councillor Carson moves with the seconder.
Carson, sure.
Seconder, and to second it. All those in favour, so yeah.
I'd like to have recorded in the meeting minutes, please, our thanks to Liesl, for all her work. She's devoted, what, a year and a bit more to all this, and Kate especially, because she's done all this work in addition to her job as General Manager Corporate Services. So I just like to have that recorded in the meeting minutes.
Thank you, councillor. Yeah, we'll make sure that's in the minutes. Thank you. So we now have to move it and a seconder. Put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no. It's been carried. Thank you. Thank you, team. That's only the start. Okay, we now move to item 5, page 320. Thanks, Teresa. And that is the submission on local government system improvements amendment bill. I have, it's rather,
330, 330.
yeah. Yeah. Just, I have a couple. On number 12, where it talks about council supports any submission in relation to any submission point, I'd be a bit cautious about, it doesn't matter who it's from, but signing something, I mean,
Unseen.
we haven't seen.
Exactly.
I think we need to clarify that. I mean, just it states here, I mean, it doesn't matter who, whether it's Manapuna or not, it doesn't matter, but the fact that we're endorsing something, we don't even know what's written. So certainly, we need to clarify that. And there's another comment here on page,
On page 29, question 29, where we support. Paragraph 29.
council therefore, yeah. Moving cost effective with when we've done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And just some explanation on what we actually really mean on 18, definition of public notice. Just seemed a little, to me. This I just didn't seem to be that clear. Might be just me, I don't know.
Through your worship, just in terms of paragraph 12, I can have that reworded to say that any submission from either that aligns with council's position, and make that a bit more clear that relates to that. Sorry, so the next one, 20.
18.
So effectively what the proposal is under the amendment bill is to remove the definition of public
Okay.
from the Local Government Act. And so what I'm saying there is just actually, rather than removing it completely, maybe you should just define it or find a link to the act that defines that.
Yeah.
29, I think was the one.
Yeah, 29, yes.
Next one. So basically that's in relation to the fact that obviously that they've removed the well-beings, and what they're saying that is that the way the act is written at the moment, it looks quite specifically to households and businesses, and the title on a draft submission is suggesting that a community extends beyond just businesses and households. So it includes, recreational, includes visitors to Upper Hutt. It includes organisations that use our facilities. It can include our local iwi, and particularly the marae at Rongamai. So it's not just businesses and residential activities that are part of our community. And then what was the last one?
No, that was right. But 44, I do think we should, when you read that 44, that I agree where we say that it's unclear, right? I mean, council acknowledges proposed amendments for the local authority to foster the free exchange of information and expression of opinions by elected members and foster the responsibility of the elected member to work collaboratively. I mean, it is unclear to that, so I think we should highlight. Yeah.
If you're happy, your worship, I'd like to provide some further clarity on later paragraphs. So in terms of paragraph 63 at the top of page 333, subclause D is specifically requiring consultation for subclause C, so I'll need to make some tweaks to that paragraph just to make sure that's a bit clearer. And then just in terms of paragraph 68 and the repeal of sections of the Local Government Act, the sections that they are looking to repeal talk about the first time that you do an LTP, the first time that you do an annual plan, something that you needed to do by 2005. So it seems sensible that they were removing some of those provisions. In terms of paragraph 69, that specifically relates to development contributions. And what that relates to is that currently you have to have a resource consent or a building consent in order to collect contributions. Obviously, with the way that the government's going in terms of permitted activities, there may be no building consent or resource consent that comes through. So I think that removing that just provides us more flexibility to be able to charge contributions where we don't have consents. And then in terms of section number 7, paragraph 70, that's just standard orders and the requirement for a national consistent set of standard orders.
Thank you. Councillor Carson, you had a question?
Thank you. First of all, while presumably this, before it goes to the select committee, the officers, whoever does this, will summarise the presumably our submission, presumably. But I would like to see at the first page, an executive summary of our main issues that we have with the proposed legislation on the first page, because we're talking about 10 pages of submission, quite detailed, and I'm sure that none of the MPs on the select committee are going to read the whole 10 pages. They will all read an executive summary or the summary that the officers for the select committee will prepare. And so that's my first point. The second point, I don't think our submission points out the difference between us and, for example, the larger councils like Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, who have a source of income other than rates and subsidies. And so they have a lot of source of income from dividends, from shareholding, etc. Our city council doesn't. So its prime means of paying is rates and debt, which is not really paying through rates. So I'd like that emphasised somewhere in the submission under the rates capping part of the submission, please. I think that's quite important. All councils are not the same, and councils, in terms of this council, while it exists as a council, it's not merged, will have some great difficulty with rates capping. The second point is that I don't think we are strong enough on the 4 well-beings, which the coalition government is determined to get rid of. And I think we actually be saying is we strongly oppose getting rid of the 4 well-beings, and we don't do this in this submission at all. What we do is say, well, the well-beings are not clarified, and here's a list of half a dozen things that perhaps they should think about in the description of what's left for a council to do if 4 well-beings are taken out of the Local Government Act. So I'd like us to actually up front say we are opposed to removing the 4 well-beings for these particular reasons. And the more so because councils are no longer having 40%, in the case of our council, water assets. What's left for the council to do? And that's one of the questions that the incoming new council will need to consider, as well as setting what the impact is going to have on rates going forward and the long-term plan. So, and with rates capping and an elimination of 4 well-beings, where does that leave councils in terms of providing services? So that is unclear completely. And I guess that's what our draft submission is trying to say, but it must say, I think it should say it explicitly. So that's my 3 comments.
Councillor Keary?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. I'd support the exec summary up front. But yeah, I was going to weigh in on the well-beings as well. It feels like a bit of a underhanded way of actually just removing local voice. You know, what are we here to advocate for if it's not what important to me is things like the library, which you could say is well-being, or playgrounds or parks, or all of that stuff, as well as the roads, sports fields. it's all core and it's incredibly important. So I think I'd support that strong objection to the proposal.
So the councillors agree with that?
Yes.
Did you get those comments, Suzanne? Yeah.
Then I'd like to go to point 8 and then point 9, but I do support the executive summary up front. I think that having those bullet points up there are really, really important, particularly the thread that we're trying to make, and if we have a strong voice around the full wellbeing. So my concern on 8 and 9 is that we don't reiterate or actually are not strong enough with regard to rates capping and the effect that it will have on our community with regards to us only having that because we don't have other revenue streams at the moment. I think one brush prescription that they're working on with looking at what happened in New South Wales, I don't believe would work for us. So if we could strengthen up those 2 paragraphs, I think it would be really, really good. Once again, if we're supporting the Tūtara submission, can we actually say what part of that submission we're supporting rather than just saying we support it? Because are we supporting it in its totality or in reference to this particular thing, which is rates capping, would be really, really good to do. And then my next one that I wanted to go to was, and it's no wonder, 22, waste. Tim smiles. I just think that we actually need to be a little bit more punchier there, because what they're doing is they're changing a piece of legislation in one thing and it's contradicting to a piece of legislation in the other. And I think we really need to point that out, because the legislation in the Waste Minimisation Act is actually what we're trying to do. It's part of the agreement that we've got, which is the waste minimisation, that we agreed to. And this is contrary to a lot of the themes and threads that are in that. So if we could strengthen that, that would be really, really good. And like I said, if I look at 26, it's about the social, removing cultural, social and environmental well-beings. It's whilst my colleagues didn't talk about the environment, they talk about the others. I think that's still really important. And the reason why I'm sure that the environment also feathers into the piece of legislation that might be coming through, where councils have got to be responsible under the waste management and preparedness of if an event was to happen to us, somewhere I think we need to put that in, that this is a cost that's going to come to us, and it's, and then you kind of allude to it in 36 as well. 43, council notes the proposed amendment that section 78 will now apply to council controlled organisations, delivery of services by a different entity, but it's not where it fully considers the relationship to water services bills. I think a little bit more explanation around that would be really, really good, particularly going to the new entity that we are. I'll leave the standing orders the way they are. We'll wait to see whether anything comes at 46, but 55. The proposed amendment to section 200 of the law clarify the territorial authority must not require a development contribution for a reserve network infrastructure. Where do we sit with that?
It's pretty your worship. I think some of the stuff that's in there is quite confusing.
Yes.
Particularly around the fact that it might not be that a third party necessarily pays for it.
Right.
And therefore you could find yourself with a funding gap. And if
Yes.
there's a provision that says you can't charge anybody else that if a third party is already committed to funding it.
Yeah.
How do you fill that gap? I guess it's and there's no clarity around that. That's said.
So can I say then that we actually make that more stronger and say that actually it will disadvantage us going forward if there is a gap, a funding gap with regard to that, because I just think we need to have every opportunity there, and I'm sure Kate would agree with me, where we get funds in here when we can or where we can, because at the moment we seem to be limited as to what we can do. So that would be good. Yeah, and I'm just reinforcing what everyone said about the community voice around 63. So thank you.
And I think when it comes to that, I think that we should be pointing out consequences of rate capping.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that you'll be in step with the community if you just say we're against rate capping. I mean, we've got to explain what the consequences are of rate capping if that's what you want. Because if you look at the polls, most of the country agrees that rate capping should happen. I'm not, but so it's what the consequences are, what the issues will be for a community if that happens. I think that's the.
I think you're right, Your Worship. It is about explaining the consequences because we are only, the only revenue we do have is through, rates. But if you look at Plymouth and other places like that that have a number of multiple streams like Venture, Taranaki and things like that and philanthropic. Yeah, so explaining the consequences on, because I'm sure we're not the only council, Your Worship, that's in that,
Oh, no, there's
yeah.
not. There's a lot of councillors in here. Basic and Suzanne.
For you, Your Worship. So to be fair, that this legislation doesn't include rates capping.
Yeah, no.
That's coming later. So I think I just be careful about how that's worded in terms of providing some feedback on that because of the later opportunity to come up.
Yeah. So we do have the recommendation there. Receive and note the report, approve the submission of attachment 1 and option 1. That's about the option 1 is actually making a submission.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, Your Worship, currently an A receives and notes the report. Oh, okay. So C covers our amendments that we talked about? Okay, fine.
So we have the recommendations there to have you to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hammond, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, it's been carried. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you.